Chapter 1. It's been 3 years since our separation was finalized. Beth and I were married for nearly 18 years before our breakup. We were high school sweethearts and got married shortly after graduation. At the time, we only had eyes for each other, which was really special. Love is more important than anything. Our life together was pretty good. We had 4 kids: Amy, Brad, Carla, and Daryl. We affectionately called them the alphabet kids. After Daryl was born, I got a vasectomy so we wouldn't have any more children. Amy and Brad are in college now, but Carla and Daryl still live with Beth, my ex-wife. But what happened? How did it all go wrong? We seemed like a happy family. We were dedicated parents and supported our kids in everything they did. Like many young couples, we faced financial struggles. I worked in a factory and Beth started working at a local store once our older kids started school. Sometimes one of us had to put the younger kids in daycare when we couldn't be there. It wasn't the ideal situation, but it's how things are in today's society. I often wonder how my parents and grandparents managed when the women didn't work. I'm not sure if it's society or our desire for material possessions that caused our financial pressures. We wanted so many things and we wanted them quickly. Our love life started off great, like most young couples. We were close all the time. But as the kids came into the picture, we started becoming less closer. I think that's how it is for most families. We just didn't have the time, or so we thought. Looking back, the problem was us. We took each other for granted. Our special moments became rushed and routine. It was missing the passion and connection we once had. I guess it became boring, but only because we didn't prioritize love and emotional connection. Eventually, I got a promotion to supervisor, and our financial situation improved. As the kids grew older, we were able to go out occasionally. Going out for dinner and a movie added a bit of excitement to our somewhat dull relationship. I think all marriages go through ups and downs like this. You still love each other, but you start taking each other for granted. One day, Beth came home and mentioned wanting to go out with her coworkers. Since our kids were old enough to take care of themselves, I didn't see any problem with it. This happened about 4 years ago. Beth got dressed up nicely, wearing slacks and a blouse. She was always conscious of her weight, but she looked good. When she came home, I asked her how her night was. She said she had a good time and mentioned some of her coworkers. I didn't have anything against the people she worked with, but most of them were divorced or separated. I didn't think they were the best influence on Beth. I voiced my concerns, and she got upset, thinking I was belittling her friends. I didn't say anything like that, I assured her. I just worry that these women might be looking for new partners, and you'll be with them. I saw a hint of guilt in her eyes. After 18 years together, I knew all her moods. I hit a nerve. "Did you dance with any guys?" I asked. She hesitated before answering. I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, I danced with a couple of guys, but that was it. Deep down, I knew there was more to it, but I didn't push it at that moment. She told me that she and her coworkers planned to go out once a month. I wasn't thrilled about it, but there wasn't much I could say. I would just have to wait and see. I watched her get ready without saying much. I told her I would wait for her. It was past midnight when she came back home. She glanced at me and headed towards the bedroom to change. As she started walking towards the bedroom, I asked her, "You were wearing a special dress when you went out. Why aren't you wearing them now?" "It was hot, so I took them off," she replied. "Beth, this is getting out of hand." "We need to talk," I said. She asked me to leave the room so she could undress. I walked towards her and grabbed her arm, something I had never done before. "Please, Jerry, don't. I beg you, please don't," she pleaded. She knew what I was about to do. Tears welled up in her eyes as I pushed her away. "Well, I guess that explains why you're not wearing that dress," I stated. "I'm sorry, Jerry, it just happened." I was drinking at the party and Joe kept complimenting me and then he hugged me and made moves. "I've only ever been with you, Jerry." The other girls said Joe was great, and I allowed myself. It wasn't just one man, was it? "Did more than one man have relations with you?" I questioned. "Yes," she confessed. "Does our marriage mean nothing to you? Did you ever consider me or our kids?" I asked, feeling hurt. "Jerry, I'm sorry. It wasn't about love like what we have. Barb, one of the other girls, is married, and she told me that she and her husband are into swapping. I don't want to lose you, Jerry. Please come with me once and try it," she begged. I needed time to think. My mind was spinning in different directions. I told her I didn't want to discuss it further at that moment. I couldn't fully grasp what had just happened. I told her we could talk the next day, and that I would sleep on the couch that night. The next morning, after the kids left, I got dressed and went to work. Beth was still asleep, exhausted from the previous night. I couldn't focus on my job and ended up taking the afternoon off. I went to the store where Beth worked and walked up to her while she was working as a cashier. She smiled at me, and beside her was her friend, Barb, as I read from her name tag. "Hey, why aren't you at work yourself?" she asked. "I'm going to see Jeff, our lawyer, today. I'm filing for a divorce," I said, turning around and walking away. I heard Beth yelling for me to wait, but she had a customer and didn't know what to do. She was probably in panic mode. I didn't wait. I briskly walked out, got into my truck, and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I definitely knew where I didn't want to be. I left a note for my kids, explaining that their mother and I were getting a divorce and that she would tell them more. I was curious to know how she would explain it. She was quite skilled at making everything my fault. Blaming me seemed to be her go-to response for most things. I ended up going to my parents' house. They were in their 60s and had been married for over 40 years. I told them that Beth and I were separating and might get a divorce. I knew it hurt them because they loved Beth and saw this as a shock. I asked if I could stay with them, and they offered me their basement. It had been remodeled into a nice bedroom, a small kitchenette, and a living room area. They rarely used the basement now since it had become inconvenient for them with the stairs. They had moved the washer and dryer upstairs a couple of years ago after Mom had hip replacement surgery. I might go off on tangents while telling you this story. There's a lot to cover and many things you'll want to know, like what the kids thought, what the lawyer said, and input from others. I told my parents that Beth wanted more freedom. It was difficult to explain that she wanted to have relationships with other people. I didn't want to share that with my parents. I simply mentioned that our perspectives on various aspects of life had changed, and we weren't able to find common ground. They weren't happy with that explanation, but it was all I could share for now. I did manage to see Jeff, our lawyer, and he informed me that Beth had already called him twice. I asked him if he was representing me or her. "She doesn't want a divorce, Jerry. She believes you two can work this out," he revealed. "Answer this honestly, Jeff. Are you her lawyer or mine?" I pressed. "I'm representing her, Jerry. She reached out to me first, and I accepted her case." "I'm sorry. If you had called me first, I would have represented you. Please talk to her, Jerry. You both mean a lot to me, and it pains me to see you heading towards a divorce." "Did she tell you why I left, Jeff?" "Why I want a divorce?" I asked. "She mentioned that you two had an argument about her going out. She got drunk and cheated on you," he responded. "Let's get real, Jeff. She went against my wishes and was with 3 men. Then she asked me if we should start swapping partners with her friends. That's my case, Jeff. I'll be reaching out to Sally Black. We all know she's the best divorce lawyer around. I'll have her contact you once we've planned our strategy." "Thanks for nothing, Jeff." I turned around and left his office. Sally was known as the toughest divorce lawyer in the state. She had a reputation for leaving men financially drained. I knew a few men who went against her, and they didn't fare well. I called Sally, and she agreed to meet with me the next day. She advised me not to talk to Beth until after our meeting. I asked about the kids, and she suggested having my parents inform them that we would have a conversation in the next couple of days. My parents called me and talked to Amy, our oldest. They told Amy that I would call them and talk to them in the next few days. They mentioned that if any of the kids had an emergency to call them, also that I would be staying at their house. About 2 hours later, Beth called the house. She told my dad she needed to talk to me. I shook my head no, and my dad said that my lawyer said not to talk to her that day. I would call her after meeting with my lawyer. I heard my dad say to Beth, "Beth, I don't know what happened between you two, but you must have hurt Jerry terribly. I've never seen him like this." He talked a little more and hung up the phone. He looked over at me and said, "Beth told me to tell you she loves you and not to do this to your family." I was mad. I knew she was going to blame me, make it my fault. My mom was out of the room, so I told my dad the truth. I told him not to tell Mom because it would crush her. She loved Beth. He had tears in his eyes when he left the room. My dad was a pretty sentimental guy. I went to work the next day. I wasn't allowed to accept personal calls in the plant except for emergencies. I told my manager about applying for a divorce and to make sure no calls were forwarded from Beth as emergencies. I was glad to be working. It kept my mind focused on something other than Beth. I met with Sally after work. She was a great lady, but pretty much all business. "Jerry, what do you want to happen here?" she asked. Wow, I guess I'm not really sure. You see, I love Beth. I really do and probably always will. I don't want to ruin her or anything like that. I just can't live with the lifestyle she wants. I'm not interested in being with just anybody. I am somewhat worried about the kids. I know they're older, but I don't want her bringing every person to the house. Although I don't think she would do such a thing, but I didn't think she would betray me either. Sally spoke. Jerry, people go through this every day. We can do whatever you want. I take it you don't want the affair situation publicly known for the sake of the kids. You need to support them, and we can pretty much decide the amount. You can give or take whatever you want. You're in control here. We might have to use the affair as a weapon to get things settled, but we'll go for irreconcilable differences in the end. Is that all right with you? You're my lawyer. I'll follow your advice, I replied. You make a pretty good salary now. Since she is working, we probably can get away with $500 a week in child support, and as the kids turn 18, decrease it by about $50 a week. No spousal support, and when all the kids are over 18, the money stops. You'll also be responsible for their medical. As far as higher education, it's up to you if you want to pay for any. You don't have to legally. Your oldest is 17 and your youngest is 12, so you will have to pay some support for the next 6 years. Do you want to go with this or do you want something else? What about our savings and my retirement package? All the savings will be divided equally, as well as any bills that are in both of your names. You have 2 vehicles, so you can each have one. Your retirement is exactly that, your retirement. We won't let her touch that. The house and furnishings are the only things left. What would you like done with them? Our house is worth about $200,000 and we owe about $60,000, but my kids live there. I'm not sure what to do, I said. I have an idea to throw at you. In many cases like yours, where you're not seeking revenge and there are kids involved, I suggest that you let her have the house to live in until the children are all grown and out of the house. Say age 21 for an example. At that time, the house will be sold and the money divided equally, or one of the 2 parties can buy the house at half the worth minus what's owed on it. She will be responsible for half the house payment. So much to go through. Why wasn't I enough for her? 18 years down the drain. I guess we can go with that. What if either Beth or Jeff want to fight it? I asked. Then we pull out the big guns and bring up the cheating. I'm pretty sure they don't want that. If they do, then we'll ask for custody and a 50-50 split of everything, and of course no support since she won't have the kids. I took the next day off and Sally called Jeff and told him that she had an offer for him and Beth and asked if they could be at her office at noon. Of course, Jeff complained about coming to Sally's office but agreed to it knowing it was a no-win situation for him. Jeff and Beth showed up at the same time. I figured Jeff told her to wait for him in the parking lot. There we were at the table, Sally and me on one side and Jeff and Beth on the other. Jeff spoke first. He knew Sally and wasn't happy about being on the opposite side. Nice to see you again, Sally. I know how you operate and like to get down to business. Before you make us an offer, Beth would like to talk privately with Jerry. No, I said. She did her talking the other night. I will talk to her only after the papers are signed. Everyone here is aware of why I'm asking for the divorce. I looked directly at Beth. If you're afraid of having your personal life being exposed, please listen to my offer. I think it is very fair. Sally said, well, that question was answered. Mrs. Cohen, Jerry has made you a very fair offer. Sally handed a copy to Beth and one to Jeff. He will use irreconcilable differences for the reason of separation. As you can see, he has given you a decent income while your children are living at home. The only negotiable issue here is the house. I think Jerry has been very fair in his offer here as well. Jeff spoke again. We need time to look over this document and see about a possible counteroffer. Sally, I will talk with Beth and get back to you in the next couple of days. Jeff, just so we are clear on the issue, there will be no counteroffer. If you reject this offer, which I believe would not be wise, Mr. Cohen will file under adultery and request custody of the kids in the house. Beth looked up and was crying. Sally was playing hardball and it hurt me to see Beth cry. Beth grabbed a pen and asked where to sign without even reading it. She was crying fully then. She was afraid of losing her kids. Mrs. Cohen, please calm down, replied Sally. Jerry doesn't want to hurt you or the kids. Please take a day or so, as Jeff has suggested, and see if everything is agreeable. Maybe we have overlooked something. I'm sorry about my threatening tone, but I wanted to make it clear that we are offering a very good settlement here. Jerry is ensuring that you and your kids are well taken care of. So please take the document and discuss it with your lawyer, and Jeff and I will discuss it tomorrow. Sally handed her a box of tissues. Beth took a couple of tissues and looked at me while her crying lessened some. Jerry, I do love you no matter what you think. I was just hoping that we could put some time between us and maybe get back together, but I see that you have already made your decision. No, Beth, you made my decision for me. You want the freedom to do as you please, and I'm giving it to you. The only thing I ask is that you keep your friends away from my kids, or I'll take them from you. That's a promise. Beth started crying again as she hurried out of the building. Jeff said goodbye to us and told Sally he would probably see her tomorrow or the next day. Sally looked at me and told me it looked like I would win this case. I told her there are no winners, only losers. I lost the only woman I ever loved, and my kids now live in a single-parent home. No, we didn't win. We just got a fair agreement. My daughter Amy drove the two youngest over to my parents to see me. I was happy to see them. They kept asking questions, and I kept telling them that their mom and I weren't getting along, and we didn't see eye to eye on some major issues, and we would be getting divorced. I tried to explain to them that their mother and I would always be in their lives. We just wouldn't be together. Daryl, I will be at your games. I wouldn't miss them. And Carla, when volleyball season gets here, I'll be in the stands rooting for you. I will always be part of your lives. I hugged them all as they told me how much they loved me. I gave them my cell phone number, and of course they could always call me at Grandma's house. Brad showed up a little later. Dad, I have a question for you. Did you betray Mom? No, Brad, I would never betray your mother. Why would you ask me that? Well, Jim, my buddy at school, and Travis, our neighbor, said their parents are divorced, and in both cases their dad was caught betraying their mom. I was hoping you didn't do something like that. God, I love you, Dad, and I'm going to miss you. Brad, you won't be missing me. I'm not leaving the country. I'll always be here for all you kids. It will just take some time getting used to our situation. Chapter 2. Well, the divorce was finalized, and I kept my promise to the kids. I went to most of their school functions. I saw Beth at most of them. She was a good mom, and if she was having any relationships, she was keeping it very private. I might mention here that Beth and I were always on speaking terms. We got together for the kids' birthdays and other special occasions. The only agreement we had was she wasn't to mention her dating life to me. We talked about the kids, holidays, my parents. No topic was off limits but her love life. A couple of times she started to say something about a male friend or something along those lines, and I would get up and leave. The agreement that Sally and I wrote up, we all signed. I wasn't there when Beth came in to sign it. Sally told me Beth took it pretty hard. We had a few arguments with Jeff on what credit cards would be paid and by whom. I guess that was his way of saving face. I told Sally that if things got tough, I would pay them. We canceled all our credit cards and had new ones issued in separate names. I talked with the kids regularly. They told me that their mom accepted the fact that we were divorced and seemed a little happier. I asked them if she dated, and they told me no. She did go out with girlfriends about once a month. I think I cringed when I heard that. I never did have that heart-to-heart with Beth. She wanted the freedom to explore, and that wasn't my thought in life. You don't marry someone and decide to find new attractions. It was the way I was brought up. As I mentioned, my parents were married over 40 years. Maybe we did get married too early, and she didn't get a chance for whatever it is she is seeking. I never explored the romantic realm either. I was happy with Beth. Going back a couple of years, I should mention that I did start dating again. I went out with a few women from work. At my age, most women I met and dated were divorced. I made it a point never to date a married woman, even if she was separated. It's funny how you can't just shake it off and go on with your life. I tried, believe me, I really tried. All the women I dated just didn't do it for me. My best days were the family events when I could see Beth. One night last year, I went out with the guys from work. They said they knew a noisy lounge where the women hung out. Of course, you know who I saw there. It must have been ladies' night out. I looked up and there she sat. It was funny though, because there weren't any guys around them yet. I didn't know any of the women she was with. The only one I ever met from her work was Barb, and she wasn't there. I walked up to Beth from the side so she didn't see me coming. Would you like to dance? I asked. Jerry, what are you doing here? She asked. Just out with the guys. Are you waiting for someone, or do you want to dance? I replied. No, yes. I mean no, I'm not waiting for anyone, and yes, I'd love to dance with you. Let me introduce you to my friends. She rattled off a half-dozen names and then said, "These women all belong to our card club. About once every 6 months we go out instead of playing cards, and it just happens to be tonight. Now, how about that dance?" We went up to the dance floor and I held her in my arms. "Just like old times, isn't it?" I said. She looked up and smiled as I pulled her tighter. We had 2 slow numbers in a row and then the band started a fast one. "I never could dance to those type songs," I said as I walked her back to her table. She seemed sad that I took her to the table. "Ladies, it was nice meeting you. I better get back to my friends." As I walked away, it just didn't seem right. I didn't want to see if she was approached by another guy. I told my friends that I had to leave and would see them later. As I walked out the door, I turned and saw Beth staring at me. The next day, I got a call from her. She said it was nice to see me out and about and enjoyed being with me. She asked me if I would help plan Amy's wedding reception. My oldest daughter was going to get married. It seemed like just yesterday I held her in my arms. Now here she was ready to start her life with her boyfriend. It's funny Beth called the day after I had seen her since I knew Amy's wedding was a year away. I told her I thought it was a bit early since it was so far away. She told me that reservations and such have to be made way in advance. I suggested she give Amy a call and make the plans with her. After all, it was her wedding. After they got their ideas on paper, I would look at the financial end. She said that was okay and she would give Amy a call and get things started. I wanted Beth to know that one dance does not put us back together. I called her about a month later to ask her how the plans were coming along. Carla answered the phone and said that Beth had gone out with friends. I was annoyed but really had no right to be. We've been divorced for over 2.5 years now. I did ask Carla if her mom went out regularly and she told me about once a month. I called my buddy Pete and asked him if he wanted to go to the lounge. He was divorced also and enjoyed the girls. We walked in and the place was crowded. I saw Beth sitting with a group of people, both guys and girls. I decided to forget about her. I was going to find another girl to dance with. I saw this young woman, probably around 30. Pete said, "Wow, now that's nice. Check out those girls sitting by themselves." The girls were seated with some other women who were dressed about the same. They were only a couple of tables away from Beth and her friends. I was walking in the direction of Beth's table when she spotted me. Her mouth kind of flew open and I walked right past her table into the table with the stylish young woman. "Care to dance?" I asked her. "Sure, I like older guys, especially good-looking ones," she replied. I knew she said it loud enough that Beth heard her. We got up and I held her close. I wasn't holding her hand but had my arms around her. "I'm Jerry, and you are a very lovely woman." I was dancing almost in front of Beth's table. "I'm Rachel, and it's nice to meet you, Jerry." I kept her close and tried not to look at Beth. The guys at Beth's table were staring at Rachel. The next one was a fast song, but Rachel and I stayed on the floor and danced. I knew this would get to Beth since I never danced fast songs with her. It was followed by another slow one, and I grabbed Rachel and held her tight. She just smiled at me. At the end of the song, I walked her back to my table and told her maybe we could dance again later. Rachel replied, "I'd like that." Pete had just returned to our table also. He danced with one of the other girls who was there at the same table with Rachel. I was sipping my drink and Pete looked up and said, "Here comes an attractive girl." He had never met Beth, but that's who was coming to our table. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. I looked over at Pete as though she was talking to him. "Jerry, answer me." I stood up and said, "It would be a pleasure." I looked over at Pete and said, "Pete, meet Beth, my ex-wife." Pete's mouth dropped open, remembering he had just called her attractive. As we were dancing, Beth said, "What was that all about?" "God, she would have asked you for alone time on the dance floor if you would have asked her." "Isn't that why we're divorced?" "You wanted me to be with other girls so you could be with other guys?" I asked. "Jerry, please, you and I never did talk about it. I was wrong." "Look, Beth, all you can say is, I was wrong. Maybe I should be romantic with that little gal, and then I can say I was wrong too. Besides, we're not married now. When you went on your spree, you were my wife. My wife, damn it." Some guy came up to Beth and me on the dance floor and asked Beth what she was doing. "You're supposed to be my date, and you asked this guy to dance," he asked. I looked at this person and said, "Get lost, pal, you're not getting any off Beth tonight." I could tell it really embarrassed Beth. "Who are you, her husband or something?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm her husband and you're going to be in trouble if you don't get away from us." Beth started to talk when I interrupted her. "Do you want to sit with me or go back to your boyfriend here?" Beth was really angry and pulled away from me and went back to her table. I grabbed the guy by the arm and told him if he tried anything with her that night, that I would find him and hurt him. Then I let go of his arm as he went back to his table. The two young girls we danced with earlier came over and sat with us. I normally don't treat girls like this, but Beth had a clear view, and I was putting it on pretty thick. These girls were there for one reason that night. The little blonde I was with asked if we were ready to leave. She told us she was into us. I asked her to do me a favor first. I pointed over to Beth, who was sitting there looking really mad in our direction, and I asked her to go over and tell that woman that she was going to get her wish that evening. The little blonde smiled and walked over and told Beth what I had said, and she came back. Beth was furious and tried to get up but was trapped between some other people. By the time she got up, we were gone. I had turned off my cell phone, and when I turned it on, I had 10 messages from Beth. She was angry. She called me every name in the book. On one of her messages, she said I ruined her evening that made me feel good. It was about 9 in the morning when I called her. She answered the phone and I asked her if she was calmed down any. She began ranting and raving again, saying what a jerk I was and how much I hurt her. Then all of a sudden she stopped. How does it feel, Beth? To know the one you love is romantically involved with someone else. It's the life you chose. You are romantically involved with who you want, and I'll be romantically involved with who I want. To heck with love. I could hear her crying as I hung up the phone. I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks. Then one day she called. Jerry, can we talk? I mean, about everything. I know it will hurt you because seeing you with that woman hurt me, so I know what I did was much worse. Beth, it's over now. Go on with your life and do what makes you happy. I don't care anymore. I just wanted you to get a taste of how it felt, Jerry. I haven't been with anyone else romantically in 2.5 years. The last time was a month after you left me. It wasn't all that great and there was no love. I realized that it was just people using me. I'm not someone who is easily used, Jerry. I was wrong, I was really wrong, and there is no way I can prove it to you. I wanted to try and explain it to you, but that type of life is not for me. I realized it when Joe asked me if I was his girlfriend. I slapped him hard across the face. He went to hit me back, but I kicked him in the groin before he had a chance. I don't want that life. Jerry, I want the life that we once had. Honest, 2.5 years. What about that jerk a couple of weeks ago? He said he was your date. He had every intention in getting close with you. He was friends of one of the guys at our table. The other guys at the table were with their partners. Since I was the only single girl at the table, he assumed he was going to be with me. I had no intention of doing anything other than maybe dancing with him. Besides, he told me you were going to beat him up if he laid a hand on me. Did you tell him that? I sure did. Do I have to follow through on my threat? No way, he wouldn't even dance with me. The only reason I went back to the table was that you embarrassed me so badly. Then you sent that girl over to let me know you were going to be with her. Did you, Jerry? Beth, we're not together. I can do what I want. By the way, whatever happened to your friend Barb? I don't see her with you anymore. They don't come here anymore. She and her husband are no longer married. Her husband ended up divorcing her, and he and the other woman's husband left together. 2 more marriages fell apart. I thought it was odd she mentioned the place. She mentioned she hasn't been there for years. I thought I'd change the subject. How are the wedding plans for Amy coming along? You haven't told me much about them, and now it's only a few months away. I asked. I know you know all the plans. Amy has talked to you a dozen times. I guessed I felt you didn't want to be alone with me, so that's why we made the plans and just let you confirm them. I'm not afraid to be alone with you, Beth, I said. Oh yeah? I don't believe you. If you're not afraid of me, then take me out on a date, she laughed. I don't think that would be a good idea, Beth. It may give the wrong impression. People might think we were getting back together, I replied. I knew you were afraid. You still love me like I love you. You just won't admit it, she said. Beth, I do love you, but the pain of what you did to me is still there. I see it every time I look at you. When you betrayed me, you took a big part of my heart away. I don't think it's healed yet. I don't know if it ever will be. Oh God, I'm so sorry, and there is nothing I can do. Nothing. Jerry, I'm the one who ruined our relationship. I'm the one who lost the only person I ever loved. I'm also living daily with the guilt. I've thought time and time again about taking my own life, but it's the kids that would have to live with that. I've done enough harm to them. I was hoping that one day maybe, just maybe, we might get back together. I didn't know what to think anymore. I never had talked to her, and now I hear this. Oh God, my mind was in turmoil. I wanted her, I loved her, but I hated what she did to me and to our relationship. What if she followed through on her thoughts? Was she trying to make me feel guilty? I had to know more before I'd believe her. I thought I knew her well enough to know if she was lying to me, but I don't know anymore. I had to find out for sure. But how? We all have thoughts like that once in a while. Thank goodness we don't act on them. I had to say something to her, but what? Beth, I'm getting hungry. Want to join me at the Red Lobster for lunch? We could talk about what we'll give Amy for a wedding present. All I heard for the next 30 seconds was crying. Then a soft voice said, I'd love to. Now, Beth, you have to understand that this isn't for anything romantic. It's just lunch and a little talk about Amy's wedding. I understand. I could almost hear her smiling. I stopped by to pick her up and she was waiting on the porch. She looked so beautiful. Dressed up in a nice dress that showed her legs. I pulled up and she practically ran to the car. She got in and just smiled. We talked about general things, avoiding the heavy stuff. She told me she had bought a dress for the wedding. She told me I better get measured for a tuxedo. I knew I had to wear one, but I don't think any guy looks forward to it. Without thinking, I asked Beth if she would go with me to see how I looked in one. I hadn't worn one since our wedding almost 22 years ago. She looked surprised, and so was I. It just came out I was so used to asking her opinion when we were together. Yes, I'd love to come with you. Just let me know when. I had to be careful I could get myself into trouble here. We were seated at the table and we both ordered iced tea. We always ordered the same stuff. We had so much in common. Beth, I need to ask you something, but I really have to know the truth. I promise after you answer, we will never discuss the topic again. Did you mean it when you talked about taking your own life? She looked at me with a tear in her eyes. Don't worry, I won't cry. I've done that enough in the last 3 years. In answer to your question, yes, I did. I told you I went out once after you left me. I know this is going to sound really silly, but I did it for revenge against you. Revenge against me. I don't unders. I was all confused, lost, and felt abandoned by you. I know it wasn't your fault at all, but at the time I wasn't thinking clearly. So I went out again to get back at you. I wasn't enjoying it at all, and that's when I got up to leave and he called me a terrible name. I slapped and kicked him and came home crying. The kids were already in bed and I just felt like my life was over. I went in and got the whole bottle of sleeping pills. I started crying with my little girl asleep in my arms. It's when I prayed to God for help. Calmness came over me and I decided my kids needed me and just maybe you would see the change in my life and want me back. She brought tears to my eyes. Luckily, our food arrived and we changed the subject and started eating. Afterwards, I asked her if she wanted to go to a movie. We found a funny one so we could both laugh. I took her back home and she asked me if I wanted to come in. I told her not, then I had a lot of thinking to do and before she got out of the car, she leaned over and hugged me. I love you, Jerry, just remember that. She got out without me saying anything and went into the house. Something just didn't make sense. I wanted to believe her, but the pieces of the puzzle didn't fit. For one thing, if you go to a swap club, you have to have a partner. Who was hers? It couldn't be this guy Joe because that's who she swapped to be with. Where was her partner when she was fighting off this Joe guy? I wanted to believe her, but I needed answers. My biggest problem was where she went every month and with whom for 2.5 years. The kids never mentioned meeting anybody. Maybe she was being honest with me and I was just being paranoid. All our free time was spent preparing for Amy's wedding. I did have lunch with Beth, Amy, and my son Brad and Amy's fiancé Ben. We were going to get measured for our tuxedos. I swear I looked silly, but Amy and Beth both said I looked handsome. Time flew by so fast and before I knew it, it was time for the wedding rehearsal. I went to the church and did all the things I was asked to do. No big deal, as Amy and I walked down the aisle and I did some silly things like hopping and skipping, nothing bad, just having some fun. I remember the pastor saying that it would be different the next day. We might be nervous, so we should try to remember our parts. I thought, yeah, walk down the aisle and later say, her mom and I. Wow, I thought, who couldn't do that? Afterwards, we all went to the restaurant and had dinner. I made sure I attended. It was something that I didn't have to pay for. Before I left to go home, Beth came up to me. I had hardly said much to her that evening. Jerry, I'll see you tomorrow. It was something about the way she said it, and I leaned over and hugged her. I don't know why, but I did. Maybe it was the happiness of the occasion. I can't really say. She smiled at me and I left. I was at the church early just like I was told. The bridesmaids and ushers were all there. People started arriving. I was starting to get a little nervous. Beth was being escorted to the front row. She looked so beautiful. I've never seen her more radiant as she smiled at me. "How's my buddy today?" She laughed lightly. "He's scared out of his mind. His daughter is getting married and his wife never looked more beautiful," I replied. I realized what I said after I said it. It was true. I've never seen her more beautiful. "It's okay, honey. Everything will work out fine. You'll do great. Just don't step on Amy's dress," she smiled at me. I headed out to the back of the church and waited for Amy. When I saw her coming to be by my side, I started crying. She looked like a younger version of Beth. "It's okay, Daddy. We can do this. Mom told me to tell you she loves you and not to step on my dress." It made me chuckle, so much like her mother. My little girl was getting married. The music started and the bridesmaids and flower girl and everyone else had made their entrance. "Well, Dad, here we go," Amy said as we entered the sanctuary of the church. We started our walk down the aisle. I kept telling myself, "Don't step on Amy's dress." My eyes were filled with tears as I walked my little girl down the aisle. This was what life was all about: love and family and friends. We made it down to the front of the church with half the people with tears of joy in their eyes. Thank God I wasn't the only one. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the pastor asked. What was my line? "Me and Beth." "No, her mother and I said. I turned to sit next to Beth and she was both smiling and crying. I whispered to Beth, "I messed up. One silly line and I messed it up." "Everything is fine, honey, you did great," Beth whispered. Throughout the whole service, I was holding Beth's hand, probably to the point of hurting her. She didn't say a word, she just sat there, smiling and crying. I was glad when that service was over. Then we had to stand around for pictures and whatever else they do. Then it was time for the reception. I needed a drink and went and got one. Everyone was having a good time. Amy and Ben made a nice couple. People were saying it was so nice to see me and Beth together. Every time I heard it, Beth just smiled, never saying a word. The dancing began and they had a parents of the bride dance. I guided Beth onto the floor and started dancing. People started clapping for us. I looked around at all our kids smiling. I looked over at my mom and dad and they both gave me a thumbs up. It looked like everyone was sure about us but me. After the wedding, Beth asked me if I would drive her home. Of course I said yes. When we got to the house, she asked me if I was coming in. I answered saying, "The kids will be home shortly and I don't want them to get the wrong idea." "They already have the wrong idea. They went home with your mom and dad and will be sleeping in your bed," Beth replied. "Are you going to open my door for me?" She smiled. I decided what the heck. She wanted me, and so I decided to follow my heart. I wanted to make sure I didn't propose or anything. I still had too many unanswered questions. I got out and walked her to the door. I opened it and she told me to come in. "Jerry, you don't need to marry me tonight. Maybe that time will come and maybe it won't. I do want you to be with me tonight, just like you used to." We spent the night together, cuddling and being close. In the morning we spent more time together and then she made me breakfast. "Jerry, I'm not going to push you and I'm not going to rush you, but I will always be here for you. As long as it takes." I smiled at Beth and left the house. I didn't even hug her goodbye on purpose. I now had a new problem to think about. Something was off. I knew it but couldn't quite figure it out. Everything was too nice, fit together too easily. For over 2 years, Beth never said anything about getting back together. In the last year, she seemed to be making advances. I needed to know more. When I got back to Mom and Dad's, everyone had left. Dad asked me if everything was okay because I seemed off. I explained to him that something wasn't right and I needed to find out what. Even though it was Sunday, I called Sally, my lawyer. I explained the situation and she thought it was odd too. She told me to not say anything for a couple of days. She had a private investigator who would find out what was going on. Beth called on Monday and asked me over for dinner. I told her that I was busy and would take a rain check. I had some business to take care of. I didn't tell her I was getting anxious trying to put 2 and 2 together and kept coming out with 5. On Thursday, Sally called me at work and asked me to come to her office as soon as possible. She said it was extremely important. I asked for the rest of the day off and went to see Sally. When I got there, Sally told me things I didn't want to hear. I was right about Beth. She belonged to a club and her partner was Jeff, her lawyer. It seems that after I left, Jeff decided to take my place. Beth never decided to quit her lifestyle but hide it from me. I asked Sally why she started coming back to me in the last year. She had her freedom in her life. Why bother me? It's all about money, Jerry. In the last 3 years, she has borrowed from the home loan to the tune of $100,000. Instead of owing $60,000, now you owe $160,000, said Sally. How did she do it? Didn't she need my signature to borrow money against the house? I asked. No, when you settled on the credit cards, one was a cash equity loan. You could borrow continually on it up to a specified sum. It's almost there now. Your friend Jeff slipped that one past us. There was no way of telling once you agreed to pay the credit loans. I'm sorry, Jerry. I should have paid more attention after the divorce was final. We don't usually do a follow-up unless asked, and of course Jeff wasn't going to ask. Sally, when I spent the night with her, I checked through the cabinets for her prescription drugs. There weren't any, so I called the doctor and he told me he never wrote a prescription for sleeping pills in the last 3 years, and that Beth has been there for all her checkups. He said she was actually coming every 3 months instead of 6. I asked if she asked to be tested for any transmitted diseases, and he told me she had the tests done and is clean. Thank goodness for at least that, I thought. By me paying the medical bills, I was at least able to find this out. Well, Sally, what do we do now? I asked. The only debt you incurred is the house. We'll put a lien on it for $40,000, and if she ever tries to sell it, you'll get that part of the equity. The rest is a loss to you. As far as the kids go, 2 are already out of the house. The other 2 are old enough to decide if they want to live with your ex-wife, with you, or your parents. We will leave that up to them. Jerry, since you told me you will be leaving the state, you will probably be out of the picture. I'm sure they would want to finish the last years of their schooling here. Thanks for everything, Sally. I guess it's all up to me now. Please call and put a freeze on the equity on the house. If the kids choose to live with my mom and dad, I'll need you to transfer the child support payment to my parents. I went home and talked to my mom and dad. I told them both that I could never go back to Beth. Even though my dad already knew, I explained it as though he didn't. Beth was unfaithful to me, and I hoped she had given up that lifestyle, but she hadn't. If she would have been honest with me, we might have been able to work things out. I knew my parents were deeply hurt, but they needed to know the truth. I stopped by Beth's house while she was at work. I came right out and told the kids the truth. Their mom had been unfaithful to me. I didn't tell them about the specific details. I tried to give her time to change, but she never did. I thought we had a chance at the wedding, but I found out she was still lying to me. I could never live with her or trust her again. It just wasn't possible to forgive anymore. Now I had to tell them I was leaving the state. They could come with me, stay with their mom, or live with their grandparents. Both of the younger kids said they would stay with their mom. Even though she might have boyfriends, she never brought them to the house. Carla told me she never saw any strange men at the house. About the only one to visit, other than relatives, was Jeff. They've known him for years. I didn't have the heart to tell them that Jeff was one of her lovers. They all cried, saying they would miss me, but I explained that I would only be 5 hours away if they needed me. They would also be welcome to come and visit me anytime. When are you leaving, Dad? Asked Brad. Next week. Once I get settled in, I'll give you my address and phone number. I love all of you and will help you in any way I can. I called Beth at work. It was something I had never done. Beth, I'll meet you at the cafe. I need to talk with you away from the kids. She told me she got off work in an hour and would be there. I know she must have thought her plan worked and we would be getting back together. When she got there, I started our talk. Beth, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Because of Amy's wedding and being together, everyone is thinking we're getting back together. It's all happening too fast for me. Do you know that no one knows why we got divorced in the first place? I look back on your life for the last 3 years. Where's the pain? The heartbreak that I felt when I discovered your unfaithfulness? There wasn't any. Sure, your financial situation hurt some, but that was about it. She looked at me a little concerned. Jerry, I can explain it, she said. Here's what I need you to explain. You told me you hadn't been with anyone for 2.5 years. Why did you lie to me? You had your girls' night out every month. It seems that the women you were with from work and your card club were also members of a club. She started crying again. You being with other men caused our divorce, and you never stopped doing it. Go ahead, explain it. Go home and tell your kids why I left in the first place. Tell them you have certain desires that I'm not good enough to fulfill. They deserve to know and are old enough to handle it. I've talked to them. God, Jerry, surely you didn't tell them about me, did you? She asked. It's always about you, isn't it, Beth? Never about your kids or me. I told them you had an affair and were unfaithful to me. Jerry, I'm so sorry. You left me, what could I do? I'm a woman and need to be loved. You don't want love. What I did the other night was love. What you want is to be with multiple partners. Did you think I would never find out? How dumb do you think I am? I had wondered what would happen if we got married and then I caught you cheating again. Then it hit me your lover Jeff was behind this setup. Jeff? How did you find out about Jeff? Oh my God, what have I done? What have you done? You ruined a lot of lives, including your own. You gave up a man who truly loved you and was almost ready to come back to you. You have lost the respect of your kids, even though they will still live with you. You've hurt them all deeply. You lie, you cheat, and now you want to steal from me also. The love I had for you is still there but buried deep in my heart. All I see now is a conniving person who will betray anyone. A couple of years from now, I want you to think about what could have been. Your looks will fade and your kids will be gone, and so will the money. I guess you will still have a bunch of old friends and of course Jeff. I doubt if he'll stay around with someone who hurt so many people. She was crying hard now. Jerry, I really do love you. Please stay with me, I'll go to therapy or whatever you want. I turned to her and said, I forgot to tell you I'm moving out of state and leaving next week. Thanks for everything. You really are good at what you do, but of course you know that as well as anyone. Goodbye, Beth. Have a nice life. I knew Jeff was behind this setup. If I would have gotten remarried, then that meant I would have accepted her lifestyle and our old marriage agreement would be void. She and Jeff were playing me for the last year because of the money. She was already down $100 a month and deep in debt again, but was living the same as she always did. It must mean she had run up a hell of a debt. Such a silly person. Epilogue, I finally moved on with my life. I hurt for a while, but I was putting it all behind me. Did I love Beth? Of course I did, but her wrongdoing was just too much. It's been a few years now and I met someone. She was a few years younger than me, beautiful, articulate, and funny. She told me she was divorced. She had 2 kids that were barely teenagers. When I asked her what caused her divorce, she said, a cheating husband. He wanted an open relationship, involving other people. It wasn't for me. I'm someone who is committed to one person. I also have to think what's best for my kids. I told him to go find a woman who thinks like that, but it wasn't me. We dated for about a year and I asked her to marry me. She looked up at me and asked what the marriage vows meant to me. To love, honor, and always be there for each other through good times and bad, in sickness and in health, but to be loyal only to her and no one else. I can do all that except the always obey part. I laughed. She knew my story and about my alphabet kids and had to laugh. You see, her son was named Aaron and her daughter was Faith. We were married and all my kids attended the wedding. At first they were reluctant to attend. I had them come up before the wedding and they met my future wife face to face. They saw the kind, gentle person that I saw. Of course, Amy and Brad were both married already, and Carla was dating. Daryl and Carla were both still in college. They knew I needed someone in my life. Mom and Dad drove up for the wedding also. They fell in love with my bride to be also. They knew my life was back on track. My wife looked beautiful, petite, and incredibly attractive. Why any person would want to share her was beyond me. We went on a short honeymoon and stopped by Mom and Dad's on the way back. I showed my new wife the town I was from and the house I used to live in. Beth had to sell it because of her debts. I did get $30,000 out of it, thanks to Sally, my lawyer. We headed back home and began our new life. It was a simple life, but we were happy with it. We had only one issue, but we were able to solve it. You see, my new wife's name was Bethany. I remember her looking at me and telling me we had to do something about that. She didn't want me to call her Beth. So we decided on Honey. She told me she didn't care what everyone else called her, but she didn't want to hear anything but the word honey from my lips. I remember asking if I could call her sweetheart once in a while. She smiled and said, that would be okay too. When we are close, you can call me anything you want, but Beth, she laughed. I don't know what Beth is doing anymore. I did remove her from my life. The kids see her and say she lives in an apartment alone. They said she seems to be doing okay. As far as dating goes, they think she does, but doesn't really talk about it. They said she cried when she heard I was getting married. Of course they love their mom and do watch after her. She'll be all right, they said. I just hope she gave up some of the wild life. I guess I'll never know. I remember the last thing she said to me. Jerry, I really do love you and want you to know that I will wait for you. I know you'll come back to me. I'll be here for as long as it takes. My answer to her was forever is a long time to wait.